Thank you very much and good afternoon. In between this presentation, I'll be asking just a few questions that would relate to the presentation itself. And if someone from the middle row, the middle section answers correct, persons from both either side will have to buy something for them to drink. And if someone from this section answers correctly, then persons from the other two sections will be responsible for their drinks. So, does anyone here who have never eaten chicken? Has never eaten chicken? Right. Well, you're all in the right place. What this lecture is about, it's about two activities existing in parallel. And if left unchecked, one could be a detriment to the other. And that detriment could result in an entire poultry industry being decimated. And when you look at it, our poultry industry contributes significantly to our economy. And I'll start off with first talking about the first activity is bird keeping, which has been existing for decades, for eons. But this lecture is about one group of birds called songbirds. And since we are in the neotropics, we are dealing mostly with neotropical songbirds. The other activity is the rise and the incidence of avian influenza. And here I say it's describing the virus. It's what you call an influenza A virus of the Automyxoviridae family. It's segmented and it's a negative sense RNA genome. So segmented is in yellow for a reason, because various viruses structured differently. Some are segmented, some envelopes, etc. Avian influenza started a disease in poultry. And between 2005 and 3 years ago, there were 8,534 outbreaks and 389 million heads of birds were lost. So you're talking about within 17 years, you had 8,500 outbreaks. And when you look at it, the 389 million birds are birds that were at various stages, and a lot would have went into them: feed, labor costs, inputs, energy, etc., and all that gone. It's also found in wild birds, and at least 5,000 species of wild birds have been carrying a low pathogenic form of the virus that we refer to as low path or low pathogenic avian influenza. I'll talk more about that in a while. From 1997, you start seeing human cases, which means that it's now a zoonotic disease. There are two key components of the structure of the virus. And due to its segmented nature, the virus different segments release and recombine to form new subtypes. And the subtypes are categorized by two surface proteins or lipoproteins. The first one is called hemagglutinin, which referred to as just H. And the second one is neuraminidase that you have as N. There are 16 types of hemagglutinin, and depends on which literature you have been following. This one, the latest one said there are 11 types of neuraminidase. So for hemagglutinin, you have type 1 to type 16, and neuraminidase, you have type 1 to type 11. And sometimes in reading about avian influenza, you might see H5N1, H5 and something. The 5 is type 5 of the hemagglutinin, and the 1 is the type 1 of the neuraminidase. The H5N1 subtype is a combination of type 5 hemagglutinin and type 1 neuraminidase. The virus can either be low pathogenic form or highly pathogenic form. If a wild bird or poultry in a pen has a low pathogenic form, it may not even cause any kind of clinical effects. But if there's a high pathogenic form, then you're likely to lose all your flock. The highly pathogenic forms are associated where the hemagglutinin are H5 or H7. When poultry farms have H5, that whole farm have to be depopulated and all the things that goes with it. If the government or whatever country cannot afford to compensate them, then they'll go at a heavy loss. And that's just a small caption of what really happens when the virus passes through. And it is spread on some of the migratory routes. Why the H5 and the H7 are associated with the highly pathogenic forms? Because usually the hemagglutinin needs to be cleaved or cut before it goes into action. But the H5 and the H7, they mutate. And when they mutate, they go into different strains. And these strains are now amenable to other enzymes that are able to cleave the hemagglutinin. So they become more active. And that's how they become associated with the highly pathogenic forms. In the low pathogenic forms, the enzymes that's associated with the cleavage is only in the intestinal tract and the respiratory tract. But when they mutate, the enzymes from all over are able to cleave the hemagglutinin, and that makes it more pathogenic. So they are now able to evade the host defense system and later on to evade certain vaccines. So that's why sometimes when a vaccine is used, it doesn't work. And like most viruses, mutation is really like an accident out of the normal. And the accident happens over and over. And the result, over time, sort of takes on a life of its own, and you end up with a new strain. But for this to happen, it happens when the virus is spreading. So there must be a large iteration of virus spread taking place for a mutation to happen. Something like when COVID spread across the world, it started off with original COVID, and then as it spread and spread and so on, it mutated. It gave that spread gave the virus the opportunity to mutate into Delta, which was more drastic than the original one, and then it mutated again to Omicron, which wasn't so bad. So an example of this is in Italy in 1999, the outbreak that took place was because of a low pathogenic form, because of rapid spread, mutated into a highly pathogenic form. And in this case, it was of the H7 hemagglutinin. So now that was mutation to give a new subtype, to give a new strain. But here also, the viruses undergo reassortment and they could have a new subtype when, because of the segmented nature, they are able to separate and rejoin like that. So reassortment occurs when there are two influenza viruses infect a host at the same time and they swap genetic information. So you have a blue-winged teal that carrying the H3N1, and you have a cormorant that have the H5N6. So they happen to be in the same area, whether it's a wetland or near a coast, and what happens? The cormorant gets the H3N1 from the blue-winged teal. So the blue-winged teal now has two different subtypes. And in the blue-winged teal, they switch. So they now created a third subtype, and this third subtype is a H5, which is one of the pathogenic forms. And that's one way how H5 just pops up from nowhere and start creating havoc. It's pathogenic, highly pathogenic, H5N1. Also, humans have to be careful because a similar thing could happen that could give rise to swine flu. So again, we give an example of the blue-winged teal with H3N8, and there's a pig on a farm close to where the teal goes. So the pig gets both subtypes. Recombination takes place in the pig, and then one of these subtypes, the new subtypes, is a H3N2, which is a swine flu. And that's one of the ways how swine flu occurs. Now, who should really be careful about getting swine flu? All of us? And who you think shouldn't be getting swine flu? Somebody who's supposed to know better. All right? That's how swine flu could happen. So there are a lot of different subtypes circulating in the Americas. So and this is just some of them. The last time I checked, which is about 2 years ago, I made a count, was something like 54 different subtypes. Just in the Americas, North America, South America, and us in between, right? So, and look how they vary. And this is to show the adaptability of some of the subtypes. So, you've seen where the ferret across there has been found to have H1N1, H5, and something H2N2, etc. Right? Pigs and humans, H1N1, H1N2, H3N2 that our friend said he had, and H4N6. Right? So these subtypes, they are very adaptable to different class of animals, mammals, birds, reptiles, etc. So recently, the virus have been moving southwards. So from 2007, March 2007 to October 2021, that's some of the outbreaks you had, right? And the H5N1 is in blue. Other H5 is in green. Sometimes they can't determine which one of the new neurominidae it is, so they put an X. Sometimes it's determined. So that's up to 2021. So that was about 14 years. So from 2021 to August 2023, look how much it has increased. And in Trinidad and Tobago, every year, we have about 57 birds we could see migrating, passing through. Bird group people, that's correct. Rena? Yeah. Okay, all right. So these birds migrating, and you see how the virus spread in 2 years. Look at the difference in 2 years. So we should be paying closer attention to our migratory birds. And that's some of that's the migratory pathway. And the one we should be concerned about is that's the Atlantic flyway. That's how they move down. Right. So let's talk about the other thing. Concern for poultry sector in Trinidad and Tobago. Poultry provides over 80% of the high quality animal protein consumes. I think it might be more, right? It supports thousands of livelihoods. You have at least 20,000 people in the sector directly. And when you look at downstream, the KFCs, the Royal Castle, the churches, and all the people that sell chicken neck soup and curry chicken foot, Gira liver, all those persons are making a living. And we've been hearing in the news that CPEP had to release 10,000 people. Well, that's just half of what working directly in the poultry sector. So that's to tell you how important it is. So it goes from farm workers, processors, and it stimulates related industries, feed production, veterinary services, equipment supply, fast food change, independent vendors, crop production. And how does it stimulate crop production? Anybody want drinks? Fertilizer. Fertilizer. Call it a catch. Right. So what's a songbird? What's a songbird? All bird make song. If you catch a parrot and you squeeze it too hard, it goes. All birds make songs. What's a songbird?
Prized with song whistling capabilities.
Huh?
It's prized with song or whistling capabilities.
Well, that's true about songbirds, but it doesn't answer the question. A songbird is a bird that has more than one pair of intrinsic syringeal muscles.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree, but it has no drinks in that, right? So there are intrinsic syringeal muscles that sets this group of birds apart from other birds. And why? That's because their syrinx is very highly developed, number one. And number two, the syrinx, each side can work, innings come like our larynx, but we can't do like what they do. So not only that, both sides not only work independently of each other, but they can do it simultaneously. So that's why some songbirds, they say, are able to sing a duet with itself. One side of the syrinx singing against the other side of the syrinx, and it's happening together. Right? So why? So even though you have a good syrinx, that's one thing. But you have to have a good brain to operate the syrinx. So a songbird's brain is also highly developed. And one of the things that was discovered about the songbird's brain, there are two pathways that takes place in the brain that exists. One is the anterior forebrain pathway that's responsible for song learning. And the second one is the posterior motor pathway that's responsible for song production. So, and both pathways meet at a point that they call the high vocal center, which is up there. Both pathways link at that point. So the anterior forebrain pathway goes this way. The HVC, the high vocal center, is responsible for precision and timing of sound. The area X is a song filter area. That DLM functions as a loop area between that and what you call the L-man. The L-man introduces variation into the song. And why this is necessary? Because the variation is necessary for trial and error during learning. And that's what, when someone has a prize bird, as our friend said, because how much you pay for it because of the song, because of that, they learned from what you call a tutor bird, but here we call it a teacher bird. So be able to have that ability to learn from trial and error, that L-man is responsible for that. And the L-man is just a shortened name for it. The correct name is the anterior nemopilidium. And from the L-man, it goes to what you call the RA. And the RA now closes that circuit. The RA is like an integration site. And it closes that circuit and it starts again. And now the posterior motor pathway goes from the UVA to the HVC. So, as you see, all these various brain nuclei that exist in our songbirds, you now understand why they are able to produce this sound together with the structure of their syrinx, and why they are so valuable, and why people pay so much for them, and why they have to bring them in illegally. Right, so we're looking at the supply of these songbirds. Normally, they come from Venezuela, and the supply starts from rural native peoples catching them, and that catching activity is linked to, sometimes linked to the family. As the husband would be catching, the wife might be the one taking care of them while he goes out and catch again. It's very organized. And then there's middlemen. There are two types of middlemen in Brazil in particular. You have pasajeros and you have traficantes. Pasajeros take a lot of different birds, a whole quantity, but they might be the low value ones. And the traficantes, they trade in more high value birds and they may trade in less. And then you have agents. Now agents will be taking birds from all over. Agents from the agents, that's where it's illegally shipped out. And where the agents may house the birds, you have other things housed there too, and that's where you can have a lot of disease transfer taking place. So agents to exporters and to Trinidad, you have the illegal importers, should be in quotation. And from there it goes to pet shops. Basically to pet shops. So pet shops, you will now see, is a key stakeholder in any kind of disease coming through illegally with songbirds. Other birds too and other animals, right? Sometimes that's how they are packaged sometimes. This was actually an illegal shipment that was intercepted. Together, you had about 330 something birds that were in these little chicken containers. Sometimes all the birds in one container die. That's what happens. As a matter of fact, with every bird you see there, somebody have 30 birds would have died for everyone that lived. So there's a sort of dark cruelty to the trade. So those that live are given a lot of medication, and some may survive, and those that survive are used in bird singing competitions, which is also very organized. Anybody could tell me how many bird singing groups they have in Trinidad? Plenty? Much more.
each area of the country has a club like this one. See, James will have a group, Europe will have a group, San Grande will have a group, and then you have southern group club, and northern group club, and central group club, and all of them come together to raise. I must call it hundreds.
Yeah, right. Good. Now, for neotropical songbirds, a survey was done, and 61% of the birds kept in Trinidad are neotropical songbirds. So other than neotropical songbirds, you'll have like your parrots, cockatiels, etc. And the doves like ringneck and so on. About 2.17% of the population or the households are songbirds. And the most popular species was the chestnut-bellied seed finch, also known as chicky-chow. And pet shops are the primary supplier. As you know by now, there were 12 species, 12 most favored species of birds that involved in this trade. So I'll just show up the bird and you all will call the name, right? So what bird is that?
Chicky-chow.
Chicky-chow? What's the common name?
Fish.
Nope.
Common name is it?
Yes, that's the local name.
What's yes, I'm very simple.
Correct. What's the scientific name?
Morris, I'm going to look on that.
Well, you have to buy something for this man. Huh? All right. So, tell me. Nice. Good. Good. Which one? All right. Okay.
No, that's. We already smell on the so much.
True. You don't sit in the wild.
Brass. Brass, olive.
Correct. Correct. Brass.
Here we go.
You are a bird man.
Same.
Olive should be listening to him, eh? Huh? All right. All right. You all did well. So those are the main birds that people keep that you'll get in a pet shop. What's that?
Most of them.
All.
Are they valid for California? Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they all perfectly wild?
No. You ain't seen that one. Right? You had this year a king shot. You've seen saffron finch everywhere. You have to go certain everywhere. Right? You won't see a hairy too. No brass in the wild. Right. No. This is just to show you how big keeping birds are, how big financially and economically. You have, every year, you have about 6,423 specimens being brought in, being purchased, sorry, at $350 for one. So just the new sales alone gives you $2,248,000. And already existing 55,384 specimens at an average maintenance cost of $515 annually. So that's $28.5 million, right? So this activity every year almost generates $31 million. And that's just for you to understand the scope of what we're talking about. Okay? Now, avian influenza threats, vulnerability, and risk. Now, for the bird to come in illegally, some authority wasn't doing their work. If it had a pathogen and it was transmitted, wherever it was, wasn't doing what it was supposed to do. Likewise, if it spread and if it manifested, let's say on a poultry farm. So even though the disease came in and we didn't want it to, if we have, and if we do things as we're supposed to, then there's not supposed to be any outbreak or minimum outbreak. So we look at pet shops. So a survey of 44 pet shops was done. And in instances of introduction, what could cause introduction of the pathogen, avian influenza, 66% of the time they failed. For transmission within the entity, within the pet shop, 64.5% they failed. And for spread, to stop the spread, almost 75% of the time they fail. Why? Why are pet shops operating in such a way? Right. So large pet shops, medium pet shops, small pet shops. So most of the problem was in the medium pet shops. And from a geographic point of view, most of the problems were in the southern pet shops. So why are pet shops operating in such substandard way? Money. Money? They're making money? Or was he making too much? Anybody?
Somebody doing what?
We know that.
No standards, no pet shop, pet standards.
Correct. No standard. What else besides standards?
Monitoring.
What you monitoring?
Standards are kept.
Based on what?
Demand. It's on a designing policy.
Written where?
And it's straight out and by.
Written where?
No.
Correct. That's the point. No laws, no code of practice, nothing. But you think that bad? Which law specifically govern pet shops? Is your hand up? Which law governs pet shops? Huh? No. Veterinary public health personnel can intervene only if there's a public health issue. So if somebody pet shop, let's say, have a dog with fleas that spread it all over, then they could probably go in because humans at risk. Poultry surveillance units is under the Ministry of Agriculture. But their personnel has no power to seize and take any specimen in any pet shop. Forestry Division game wardens, they have the power to seize and take specimen, but only for illegal possession when they could prove it. So, who specifically governs pet shops? Nobody. That's the problem. One of the problems anyway. Now, most people may not know, but avian influenza have been found in Trinidad. 5 out of 38 samples tested positive for H3N8. However, when the article was published, the authors did not say where the birds came from, when the tests were done, or what species of birds they were. What?
No, is there any other?
Yeah, that's the authors there. So you could find the article and read it for yourself. Now, I'm quoting from the article. These results highlight the potential threat that is posed by wild birds to backyard and the commercial poultry in Trinidad and Tobago, and emphasize the importance of maintaining high levels of biosecurity on poultry farms. Emphasize the importance of maintaining high levels of biosecurity at poultry farms. Ensuring domestic and wild birds are not in direct or indirect contacts. The results also underline the need to carry out routine surveillance for avian influenza virus in domestic and wild birds in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. So, what they are saying that poultry farms supposed to be buffered against this thing. So let's look at the poultry farms. If you have a poultry farm looking like that, I can't say where it come from. That could stop any wild bird from going in. No, here's the next question. What's the poultry farm laws in Trinidad? None. So we'll wait until we have avian influenza coming here. We have no chicken to eat. And then we realize we have no pet shop laws, no poultry farm laws, none. So a survey of 105 farms in Trinidad. And they were clustered together. They were arranged in clustered using K-means cluster, which is a feature in SPSS. And it provided 10 clusters, ranging from 3 farms to 38 farms. And overall, 56.2% of the farms were vulnerable to avian influenza. And vulnerability was taken under 3 headings. The first one is conceptual vulnerability. You know, like when a child born with a conceptual problem, nothing much you could do about it sometimes. Child born so. Well, in this case, the farm was constructed in an area that would pose a risk. So the farm is already there, you can't do much about it. So 40.9% of the farms were vulnerable with regards to where they were located. And if you are speaking about avian influenza, you're looking at like close to a wetland and that kind of thing. Structural vulnerability, that has to do with the structural integrity of the farm. If it is well protected from wild birds and so on, not like the one you saw earlier. Almost 43% of them vulnerable, the structural vulnerability. Operational vulnerability, that is how you manage your farm. Almost 90% of them were vulnerable. That's various reasons. You can have a good farm, new high-tech farm, but if, let's say, you're leaving your gate open, or you don't have footpath for the vehicle and visitors that come in, you're still vulnerable. And why the highest vulnerability would be operational vulnerability? Tell me. What about the policies and practice?
There's no guideline.
Right, so no guidelines, correct? Nobody telling them this must be fixed, etc.
No standards.
No standards. And this is the industry that giving us 80% of our protein. So our protein future might be vulnerable to it. Where you're seeing red are vulnerable clusters. Go back a bit. Oops. Yeah, where there's red in vulnerable clusters. You see that one up there, cluster 6. Seen it? That's the one with 38 farms. 38 poultry farms, eh? I'm not talking about the other type of farms, just the poultry farms. Right. So what you're seeing now is a check to look at the overall vulnerable clusters. And you see most of those clusters were vulnerable. You have at least 5 vulnerable ones, 3 that are not so bad, and 2 acceptable. .5% of the clusters were terrible, vulnerable. 23%, almost 24% needed some work. And only 5% of the farms, okay. Is that comforting? That can't be comforting, you know. Because a man like Raina who eating chicken every day, if you have avian influenza, I don't know what you do. Good. Now, we're going to look at one of the clusters. We're looking at cluster 6. We're looking at just a piece of cluster 6. So this is a view of Waller Field. And this is the highway, that's the Eastern Main Road, and this is the Komotu Road here. So if you take a little radius of that area, and in that radius, you just block out a little bit that area. When you come to Komotu, just on the next side of Hamilton siding, you go left by the old cold storage, and you go down that area. What I'm going to talk about here is guidelines for farms on the whole, and how farms should be located. So in that small area, you have poultry farms, you have duck farm, you have sheep, you have pig, rabbit, guinea fowl, cow, buffalo, everything in that area. Does that sound like the best sort of arrangement for food production? No. Probably because Wallafield was one of the early, one of those areas set out in the 60s for agricultural production. But I think it needs some attention. And if you think that is bad, who has been listening to the news recently would have heard that they they discovered a disease in pigs in Wallafield called porcine reproductive respiratory syndrome. Anybody heard it in the news?
Yeah.
Was that found in that area? No, I'm not saying that. Was it in that area too?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't say so. So we could be facing a crisis if we don't look at how we lay out our farms as just one, and how we allow them to run down. Even the guy with the problem when they show it on TV, the pig farm was run down. Right. So back to avian influenza now. The unit in the ministry responsible for testing surveillance is the poultry surveillance unit. And when you look at surveillance activities and the surveillance approaches, you have different surveillance approaches like vector surveillance, sentinel surveillance, serological determination, participatory surveillance, clinical investigation, syndromic surveillance, and mortality investigation. They would have done, even though they said never done vector surveillance, I don't think that's correct because they have been testing wild birds. So they would have done it, but they just sent me the wrong information. Sentinel surveillance never done. They do serological surveillance because they take blood. Never done participatory and never done syndromic surveillance. Now we look at surveillance techniques or tools. The only tools they have ever done is a bit of simulation modeling. So that's, I think, something in they do desktop modeling. Yeah.
And then there is simulation modeling after you communicated the findings to them.
Okay. I think they might have done it before, you know. They might have done it before. They might have. Thanks. Right? So, no spatial epidemiology, and it's seeing how the clusters could cause a problem. No risk assessment, no quantitative risk assessment, no data mining, no basic statistics, no regression modeling, digital surveillance, no cluster analysis, nothing like that. So the unit might need some attention, some training. Right. So we're looking now at, is there really a risk? Is it songbird, pet shop, bird keeper, synanthropic bird, which is basically a wild bird, backyard flock, random visitors. Everything has to be put into perspective to do a real risk analysis. Now, you have situations where a wild bird could come by somebody's bird cage, and if the bird is infected, they can give it to the wild bird. So what kind of bird is in that cage? Good. ringneck or silver beak. And which one is that? Correct. Also too, when you have the wild birds feeding with backyard flock. You see the backyard flock? And there's your, right. So if one has the virus and is shedding, it's easy for the other to get it. So some quick risk assessment. Right, so you have the wild bird. Oops. Wild bird, giving it to the pet shop personnel, that's very low. I'm not the wild bird. The bird in the cage given to the pet shop personnel is medium or very low. And the pet shop personnel, when he goes, he may not have a backyard flock in his yard. So again, this is very low. But the backyard flock could give it to the wild bird. As you see, they feed very close sometimes, but a very high chance of the wild bird carrying it into the poultry pen. And M is medium, VL very low, L low, and H high. So we're looking at various situations here. If you look at the third one, you're looking at the bird in the cage. The owner have no reason going to a farm because he don't work there. So that's almost negligible. So you get it N. Again, you have more risk assessments. More again. And what it shows is that the highest risk is when the wild bird, the highest risk is the wild bird going into the poultry pen. But there's various risks of an infected bird in the first place getting into the wild bird. So at most, the wild bird will be responsible. See, every time when it's reached to the wild bird, there's a high chance of it going into the poultry pen. No. However, even though you might have the wild bird, you'll still have a very low chance of the disease happening. Even though you a high chance of the wild bird going into the pen, a very low chance, might have a low chance of the disease happening. Why? Depends on the bird. Depends on the bird. And I'll answer that in this. So, since there is evidence for low pathogenic avian influenza circulating in Trinidad, why has there been no actual infection? How come we haven't outbreak as yet? Besides God is actually. How come? You what?
Rate of growth in human house.
That's one good reason. All right. You said the rate of the growth and harvesting. 85 to 90% of the chickens we grow are broilers. The other 15% or 10% are layers. After 5 weeks, what happened to the broilers? So every time you grow a broiler, if there's something independent, you can break that cycle one time. Every time you harvest, if there's a disease, that's to be disrupted. That cycle of the disease could be disrupted. If it is growing, right? Whereas a layer depends on how you could keep it for 3 years once it laid. So that's one reason. No. The difference between a broiler and a layer? That's the broiler. That's the broiler. After 5 weeks, it's getting 4 pounds. Male and female. Right? After 5 weeks, that broiler is ready to eat. But that layer would lay for 2-3 years once the condition's right. Right? So every 5 weeks, you're killing them. You're cleaning the pen. So that kind of helping you to sort of, if you had a virus, that you could kind of keep it away or break that cycle or destroy it.
So what about supermarkets or
Broilers. Yeah. All right.
Madam Chair, broilers are ready for meat consumption, strictly for meat, whereas the layers they're ready for eggs, so they don't need a hop for fertility, so they lay egg approximately 1 egg a day,
Correct.
right? So broilers are strictly for meat consumption, fully meat and reproduce.
Right. So to get a high pathogenic strain, you'll need one way to get a mutation from the low pathogenic strain. To get the low pathogenic strain, there must be a rapid spread, like what happened in Italy in 1999. And to get a rapid spread of anything, you have to have a large population. And to have the large population, you have to have a large landmass. How big is Trinidad? So Trinidad, being the size it is, won't have a large population of wild birds to create the rapid spread, to create the mutation. So that's why, one of the reasons why we haven't had it as yet. Okay? All right, the other reason is that sometimes, let's say about 2/3 of the wild birds in a poultry pen, those that got in are doves and pigeons. The thing with doves and pigeons, they're very inefficient in transmitting avian influenza. They're good with other diseases, probably over 100 diseases. But where avian influenza is concerned, they are very poor. And because they are the majority of the birds in poultry pens that are poorly constructed and poorly maintained, that's one of the things that could be saving us. And the other reason, as our friends say, after 5 weeks, the cycle could be disrupted. So we go back to the question. Does the illegal neotropical songbird trade pose a risk to the poultry industry in Trinidad and Tobago? So, answer, a medium level risk exists from the porous borders, from the pet shops, from the gaps in the surveillance efforts, the role of wild birds, and poultry farms' structural vulnerability and how they operate. So that sums up the answer and the end of my presentation.